Let us think about the following. When we use the words immature and mature, what do we usually think about? Well, when we say an immature person, we can either say, well, it's a young person, they're not mature in the sense of their age, that number that we have. Or, of course, we would say they're immature because of their own state of mind. So that's actually what we're getting at when we use the words immature and mature in this video. We're talking about mentally being either immature and not wise, or being mature and therefore spiritually aware. Because the immature person needs rules in order to behave, but the mature person, spiritually aware, follows their own rules. The spiritually immature need rules and boundaries, removing any supernatural power from their life. But the spiritually mature person is no longer bound by the rules of physics and can break them at will. If he truly believes and knows he is no longer a limited human embodiment, but the consciousness that is one with the divine, he does indeed gain supernatural powers. How strange it is in this world, of course, if someone were to start believing whatever he or she wants. We could call it risky and they might go insane. But yet that is exactly the power in store for when you awaken to the true eternal nature of the soul that is one with God's cosmic soul. Whatever you feel to be true comes to pass. Physically, with goals it also works, and they are all fleeting and bring no lasting happiness. But with divine things and supernatural powers, spiritual maturity is demanded. So again, this can only be done truly by the people who are spiritually mature. The spiritually immature would indeed be fooling themselves with vain beliefs that lead them nowhere other than the insane asylum due to a lack of divine perception and what it means to wield such abilities and what responsibilities come with them. This oneness of life, however, would also mean being led by divine love and wisdom, so it can't even be used for evil or strange games on humanity, because that is egoic and immature. The divine is love itself and is completely based on a flow of giving. The divine love and all true divine things never run out, so it can keep on giving and giving since it doesn't need to get. So fill your heart with the divine, with the true divine love of God, and all supernatural things will be shown and shared with you freely. But forget about this divine love and sink down into the darkness of ignorance, the idea of separateness and physicality as being the only reality. Again, if this happens, you would temporarily lose your, well, you could say, spiritual supernatural powers. It is always temporary, since the destiny still remains to enter back into the world of light. It also contains this world, but in a much lighter and brighter frequency of existence. Over there is no darkness and heaviness. One can sightsee in a way as you cannot even imagine how beautiful all the colors and everything would be in comparison to this realm of matter alone. We can call certain places over here pretty physically speaking, but they would be even prettier in the world of light, which is God's kingdom. It is all quite something to me as well, the realization that I'm free to embrace whatever I want, as long as I'm led by love, or else it will not work in my favor. But if I'm led by divine love, I'm allowed to make up my own mind about what this reality means to me. And that would mean to bend it at my will. Someday we can consciously die, and it's one way that someone bends this reality at their will. They can die when they decide so, without waiting for old age or sickness or accidents to drag them into the next life. The ego, of course, would first wonder, why would you want to do that? Because it rather wants to stick around over here in this world alone, since it knows only this world until we lift it up into the world of light. So it would ultimately make sense if you truly know a greater world. Well, why stay in a lower, darker one of ignorance? Only then would it make sense. Before that, it doesn't sound as fun. I would say it's comparable to sitting in a room that is very hot and another room that is very nice, a nice temperature. If you know about the room that is of nice temperature, you would go there as soon as possible. That's kind of the idea of when people consciously leave the body forever. But again, for now myself, I don't exactly know for sure if I would reach that state in this lifetime, where I could consciously die and exit my body peacefully. In the end, it is not the only way to watch God's kingdom after all. If you die like the normal way, if you did spend most of your life in devotion to learning the eternal truths of the soul, you still carry the insights with you that you have truly grasped at your current level of awareness, and it might still bring you to God's world of light and bliss, whether you die at your own will or not. So that is good news, at least for most. But some indeed would rather just drop the body as soon as possible when they find out about it, and it's their freedom to do so at that point. So what we're talking about here is this mysterious ability that hardly is talked about for good reason, because people tend to fear death or find it an uncomfortable subject. But still, there are people and cases out there of people who consciously died. Now, what is so profound about it? Well, I would say what's profound about it is that old age, sickness, accidents, or even murder doesn't really hit you then. It doesn't occur to you anymore. You literally took it into your own hands and shut down your body at will and set your own consciousness or soul free into the universe. That's literally what some people are capable of doing, and that ultimately becomes the destiny of all of us, that we reach that point. But again, for now, the ego might find that a bit disturbing and wondering, well, why would I want to do that? I want to stick around here. I want to still achieve stuff. So that's why you don't have to really worry about this, but it's just a fascinating, power that people wield. Now, a profound spiritual awakening occurred back in 2013 for me. It was a state of pure joy and bliss, a deep innate sense of knowing and being alive. I knew then and there I was not truly my body, and I would also not die when the body stops functioning. It took me many years to figure out what was that peculiar state of being that I found myself in for a few hours. All of life seemed to be so peaceful and blissful to observe and experience. I felt one with the entire universe itself. Though the experience was brief and many years of darkness and suffering followed, I finally found out the answer. In that moment, I briefly turned off my service mind. For whatever reason, it turned off, and I was abiding in the pure bliss of awareness itself. So the supreme goal for us is to discover that this is the way towards bliss and unity with God's infinite being. It is when the surface thoughts, worries and feelings are stilled, so that infinite awareness can shine through your consciousness itself. It is the supreme goal, for if you establish yourself in such a state of being, you will come to know the true joy of being alive, and you no longer desperately seek it in the world around you, through activities and relationships that always come and go, succeed and fail. That is the struggle, and our minds keep dragging us all over the place into all kinds of directions. That is why if we learn to conquer ourselves and calm the mind, we finally come to experience the joy of being alive itself, and in that joy you find the unity with God becomes established automatically. I was also reminded that in order to perceive and enter into God's kingdom, the third eye needs to be open, and one earns that right of divine sight by purifying their consciousness and making it one with God's infinite being. So do we have a third eye? If so, why is it closed? I have yet to figure it out, but that is where I'm leading towards. Why is my third eye closed? Why is everyone's closed? I remember in 2018, even I once wrote for myself, "From the darkness comes the dawn of light, and from the light I return back into darkness." But that was all based on when I closed my eyes, or most other people, they admit it's dark, and then we start dreaming, which is a creation of the mind's imagination. Sometimes, very rarely though, it has been a few years ago, but it's true, I find myself, if I lay down and close my eyes, from the darkness, like a distant picture, I see something, and it comes closer and closer until it is the only thing I see, and in that moment, instantly, it's like if I move my arm, it's suddenly different arms, not the ones that are laying on my bed with the physical body. So the body then also fell asleep while my awareness looked completely beyond the physical, It seems to be when the third eye opens, but it mostly is closed, even for me. What if one could do that all day, every day, all night, every night? Close your eyes and look right into another dimension. It could be dangerous too, depending on when you do it, of course, but it seems like one of those divine things that reveal a lot more about existence than just the normal eyes of the body. 2 weeks ago I said before I went to sleep, like the Bible, God revealed thy Son to me. It pleased the Father to reveal him to me. Well, but when I asked that, I got a strange vision, and in it I was told, clear out the dust from your third eye in order to behold the glories hidden from humanity. Well, that's what we're working on. That's what you are working on as well. Perhaps you have not done it consciously, but if you start taking this seriously and consciously considering for yourself, is my third eye open? Do you know you have one? That's the spiritual eye. That's what we would call that. Is it open? Do you perceive the spiritual nature of reality? Most don't. They have the spiritual eye completely closed. It's in complete darkness. That's why I symbolically would also assume if we close our eyes and we see blackness, usually we do, it's completely black. Well, that's symbolic also of the darkness of the spiritual eye. Because ultimately you will reach a point where you could close your eyes and you could start seeing things, literally. You start seeing into other dimensions of your own being. And you can then enter into them. That's what happens when you normally fall asleep. That's sort of the process as far as I've been able to consciously measure it for myself so far. To lay down and really work on consciously falling asleep. Well, all kinds of bizarre stuff actually starts to occur that we normally don't notice because we drop unconscious and then we start dreaming without realizing that we're dreaming. That's kind of what happens, right? In that darkness of the spiritual eye. Well, ultimately, this vision told me again that there is this mess, this dust over my third eye. Well, what is this dust, this blindness? It leads me to believe it must be tied to the idea that we are a human body, or at least we aren't 100% truly fully in the state yet that we know we are formless consciousness itself. Because if that is true, none of this would be strange to pull off, but only normal and logical. It would become normal and logical for you to just enter into other dimensions if you would really believe that you are pure consciousness itself and not the body. But you see, due to the belief we have about our body, at first that makes no sense, because then you start to question it, like how could I step into another dimension with this body? And we start to kind of create this whole maze and madness in our minds that don't lead us to the truth either. So we have to let go of this egoic part of ourselves. Now, the Bible said, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. That is from Matthew. Now, the body being full of light is another mystery. It can be perceived with the spiritual eye. When you close your eyes, you see blackness, but someday you will see light if you truly work on this. You could see a world of light, and you would know that this physical reality is not the only thing there is to life. God is light. We are light. Words like these seem to completely go beyond what we normally think we are. But light can also mean wisdom, clear awareness. So if the third eye is open, it would make sense. But of course, church teaches it like it was an ability only Jesus had, not other humans. But Jesus never said any of that. He dares everyone to see it for themselves. To use your third eye is to look straight into God's nature, which causes immortality at that moment of death, since you would enter into a whole new world. We can then finally see God, but it can only occur by the grace of God. So until then, I have no other way but to remember and practice the perception of awareness itself, which is beyond the eyes. Something I noticed when I slept for a few hours. I have eyes that see, but my third eye sees not with these eyes at all. It is deeper and more subtle. Now briefly, I want to remind you of the importance of finding God's cosmic soul, to perceive Him, to know Him, to love Him above all else, for human relationships are full of conflict. It is in my opinion only possible to have divine relationships, for example with a romantic partner, friendships or family, if our ego is completely removed from both sides. If only one side has worked on this in their spare time, on these divine activities, then there will always be friction between two or more people. If both or everyone is ignorant about removing the ego, then constant drama and conflict will arise. Analyze it carefully. If you remove your ego and first learn to love God and let divine love guide your life, you will either be perfectly fine being on your own and single, for example, on this path, because God will be your partner instead and is forever your true divine relative. Or you might attract someone that is on the same divine wavelength as you, so there will be no conflicts, but only greater unfoldment together with others into the unity of God's cosmic soul. The mysteries unfold slowly as I keep contemplating the ancient scriptures and experiment with them. It is possible for me to become very calm physically in meditation, but there is another step again concerning the third eye, and how the ancients said, it is possible to turn off your senses at will in meditation, to no longer be aware of the outside world, while still being conscious in a deep inner world of being itself, which again clearly is pointing at a state of overcoming your whole physical life, so physical death again would not be an issue anymore. We all have proof of this being possible, but again our problem is it happens unconsciously when we fall asleep. The senses were turned off from our physical world and body. But to do this consciously to me seems indeed worth achieving somehow. It would be a great gateway into total peace if you can completely withdraw from the chaos of physical life at will, like that without going unconscious like sleep. But in such state of total inner peace, where the senses no longer distract you with sounds and body sensations, it also obviously is easier to communicate with the cosmic soul and receive guidance, since there's no interference of the typical earthly sensations. So to me again, I can see what the ancients were talking about. The more I go over the scriptures over and over again and think deeply on this and analyze it in my own consciousness, how all of this would fit. So you have this dialogue of the Savior, which is from the Nag Hammadi library. In it states, Matthew said, Lord, I want to see that place of life. That place where there is no wickedness, but rather there is pure light. The Lord said, Brother Matthew, you will not be able to see it as long as you are carrying flesh around. Matthew said, Lord, even if I will not be able to see it, let me know it. The Lord said, everyone who has known himself has seen it. So if you go deep enough into yourself, that's where you see this world of light, this nature of light that they're talking about. That's the beautiful part. If you truly understand what I just said and accept that and start experimenting with it, you will find it for yourself, your spiritual nature. The trained teachers from Hinduism have confirmed it is true. If you close your eyes in meditation and you focus on the area between your eyebrows, eventually one day you will notice as if you see a light appear in the darkness of your consciousness, and then if you keep looking into it, one day you become completely absorbed and consumed in the light in spirit. They said if you can do it, eventually you reach a point every time you close your eyes that the light is there, the light of God. Then you no longer fall unconscious either. That is the answer I sought, so God gave it to me. It is the darkness behind the eyes that causes us to fall unconscious, but if it turns into pure light, then we are awakened in spirit. The light would also feel warm and loving and peaceful. As you move into it with your consciousness, then the body falls asleep, but you are in the company of God's divine realm, and it will be the same as when the body dies, this process. That is what happens when the third eye is open. Bliss is achieved when contentment has been established. It means peace of mind, which turns into bliss automatically. If you could make peace with your physical life just the way it is, and no longer desperately desire and chase things to have more and more in a never-ending cycle, then you will achieve the state of bliss. Then from that bliss, consciousness can clearly perceive and think about things one at a time, instead of the mind being a chaotic mess of numerous thoughts and desires at once, causing all kinds of stress and suffering. This is evident in most people. Their minds are so chaotic, they suffer from all kinds of issues mentally and emotionally that they then try and fix with medication drugs, and perhaps endless therapies. When you have achieved pure consciousness that is able to perceive things clearly one at a time, you can then also perceive the nature of the eternal soul and find everlasting life within your very being. It is no longer remaining a mystery or a theory or nice words to hear about, but it becomes a living active presence in your field of awareness. You know and inwardly perceive on a deep inner level of your being that you exist forever. You can then finally one day die gracefully, while knowing this is just a transition of awareness. I leave the point of awareness from my physical body behind and enter into greater realms of awareness that ultimately lead towards God's cosmic soul. Practice these 3 final insights I just mentioned concerning bliss, consciousness, and everlasting life. They can absolutely transform your whole being in a divine and positive way. I can guarantee you that much.